Now, the Azanians People Organization and the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania are working together to contest the 2024 elections. In fact, representatives of the two parties join us now in studio to speak to us about the outcomes of their joint election summit, which was recently held. So let's bring in our guest. The chairperson of Azapo is Simphiwe Hashe. Also joining us is Jaki Seroke, who's the PAC's finance secretary. To both of you, thanks very much indeed for your time and patience. It's great to have you with us here in our studios. Simphiwe, let me begin with you. On a point of clarity, perhaps as a start, is the PAC and Azapo contesting the elections as one organization or as separate entities?
No, thanks, Ian, and good afternoon to your viewers. Look, Azapo and the PAC have been working together for a while, and the intent is really to go into the 2024 elections as one. And that is something that we have been working on for a while. You would remember that we entered into a cooperation agreement with the PAC in February of 2021, and the intent was to build up towards, the two organizations, contesting the 2024 elections as one. And we held our summit last weekend, and the intent was to look at the modalities of ensuring that this happens. So we have set up task teams to help us unpack this. So you would see, for instance, we have the legal task team, we have the strategy task team, we have the policy task team that is meant to enable us to unpack these things. For now, what we are agreed in principle, that we should continue to work as one, and when we campaign, we will be campaigning together. We will be going to election rallies together with the PAC, and we will be, doing voter registration campaigns together. So we are, in essence, trying to work as one because we have been working as one in the struggle for liberation of this country. So for now, what we have agreed upon is that Azapo and the PAC will ensure that if we don't manage to go to the polls as one entity, which the legal team is basically looking at,
right,
is that we will guard each other's votes and we will go into the ballot box as separate entities. If that eventuality does arise, and when we do, we will be guiding each other's vote. We will be, pulling our resources together and ensuring that we begin, the contest working together as the Azanian bloc, so to speak,
right,
under this entity we call the Azanian Liberation Front.
Aha, that was my next question, right? There's always been talk of whether or not we'll see the Pan-Africanist bloc of parties, is what they used to call them, come together again, because there is a history, quite frankly, even before democracy, right, of some kind of collaborations of those organizations that follow the school of thought of the Robert Sabukwes, the Steve Bikos of this world. So on the ballot paper, what are people likely to see if those modalities are ironed out in ways that you hope, I beg your pardon?
Well, there's a possibility that the emblems, the logos of the two organizations could be joined together. It's a possibility that will be worked out by the expert, and they'll advise us at the end. There's also a possibility that we could bring up a new logo that joins the members of the front. The real intention is not to liquidate or end the existence of the PAC or Azapo. It is to continue with our traditional cooperation and working together, and to give traction to the two organizations with the voters. Over the years, we have not been able to get a people-powered representation at the polls, and we are reviving a school of thought that has not been had that has not been had very properly, and whose philosophy and thinking is always positioned as the left. We want that voice to be part of the changes that are taking place in the country, and to be in the mainstream of the politics.
Yeah, you talk about a school of thought that hasn't been heard before, so maybe let's go there. What is the value proposition of this amalgamated party, right? Because the political landscape has changed drastically from when people might have considered the time when Azapo and the PAC were top of mind, for lack of a better term. You've got new political players that have come into the fray. You've got a young constituency of people who see politics differently, many of them disillusioned by the political system. So what would you say is that selling point then of this merger as we head into 2024?
Look, I mean, what we're looking at is really to bring back liberation politics to the mainstream. Because if you look at what has been happening in this country, you don't find liberation politics. What you find is, people interested in access to, government resources, and nothing about the interest of the people. That which made people to commit to dying for this country is not in the politics of today. That which made Sobukwe to be incarcerated and to be spending so much time on Robben Island, that which made Biko to die, is not in the current politics. And that's what we want to bring to the table. We want to bring back, the struggle, politics back in the mainstream, so that people can begin to think about what it is that needs to be done to sort out education of this country, what it is that needs to be done to sort out the poverty of this country, what it is that needs to be done to sort out the fact that people of this country still do not have land, still do not have access to economic activity, and there is a lot that is going wrong, which, those of us who decided to take up the cudgels of struggle and be at the liberation, fight to get into that business of fighting for the interests of our people in earnest. And if you look around, all the mushrooming political parties are not talking about those things, and all they're talking about is who can defend, this constitution better.
I can always hear the supporters and members of the EFF saying things differently, right? They often, even in just their own political rhetoric, actually quote a Sobukwe, a Frans Fanon, for example, and, the kind of ideological stances that they would take on the contemporary issues.
Yeah.
So the obvious question, I suppose, is how different is this from what the EFF is dangling to the constituency?
No, you can never be more Catholic than the Pope. The Pan-Africanist Congress has been led by Sobukwe, and there's various generations of that movement that still exist. The Black Consciousness movement itself was also very broad, and there are various leaders who lived with these icons that we mentioned. And the fact that we are coming together, we have seen a distance from an ethical leadership. The ethos of the liberation movement has really been to serve and to identify those goals without really making fun of them, but to really make the national point of view a very important point that the masses must have. Our sovereignty, the standards of living, the quality of living must be high from the people. You know that these leaders I'm talking about have been working closely with the masses, Zanempilo Clinic and all those things. So that ethos, that point where people liberate themselves is what is driving the Azania Liberation Front, so that people can be able to stand on their own. Sure. Active citizenry and people who know exactly what they want.
Yeah, you can never be more Catholic than the Pope, but even the Pope will tell you that the Protestant Reformation has made him sit up straight and rethink theology. I may be stressing the metaphor a bit too far, but you know what I mean.
No, I understand what you mean. But the point is that when you see a proliferation of people talking Black consciousness, talking Pan-Africanism, is something that we need to appreciate. Because that is what Biko wanted. That is what Sobukwe wanted. In fact, one of the, cornerstones of Black consciousness is about Black solidarity. It's about ensuring that Black people across the landscape of our country embrace Black consciousness, they embrace Pan-Africanism, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to take back that which has always been belonging to these two movements and bringing this together so that it can imbue society with, this thinking of Black consciousness, with this thinking of Pan-Africanism. When we see organizations like, the EFF coming to the fold and beginning to talk the language, it's something that we embrace, it's something that we appreciate, which is why we are saying that this Azanian Liberation Front is all-embracing. It invites other organizations of like mind, it invites civil society organizations of like mind who are also interested and find resonance with these objectives to come and work together with Azapo and the PAC in this Azanian Liberation Front. Remember, this Azanian Liberation Front is not about just 2024 elections. It is about continuance of struggle. It is a struggle pact between these two organizations, and which is why we are inviting other organizations that believe in black consciousness, that believe in Pan-Africanism, to come to the fold and begin to take struggle to the mainstream and ensure that we continue with the objectives for which we went to the trenches.
Yeah, it's a tall ask, especially when you consider even just the dynamics in the landscape at the moment, One of the texts that have really stayed with me from Frantz Fanon is from The Wretched of the Earth, which many people have read. The pitfalls of national consciousness is something that I think was so, it's still as relevant today as it was when it was written. This idea that people are going to develop this increasingly nationalist rhetoric, which in some ways turns Africans on each other. There are many communities in the country where we can see that happening at the moment. And I would argue that the politics at the moment and the politicians are struggling to communicate the nuances of why something like that is something we should probably shun away from. How would you insert that kind of complexity into mainstream politics in a context where these are typically very emotive conversations filled with, people making very rash decisions, shooting from the hip, sometimes for political expediency?
Yeah. Well, look, there's been a degeneration of the liberation ethos. Working with the masses, with the grassroots communities is a real program to empower people so that they can participate in every avenue of their lives freely. What we have seen in the rise of, in modern day politics, is the rise of the alternative, the international alternative right. And that movement is criticizing and taking the space of the liberation movements, which previously dominated the political atmosphere, working on the positions of change and transformation. Now, for us to do a link with the masses would mean we have to, from the front point of view, the Azanian liberation front of view, work with almost everyone and let the people take up responsibility for their own changes in their own communities and not leave it to government, and question public representatives, including ourselves, so that we can see a better quality of life. We can see changes as we see them. Now, I'm saying national consciousness, particularly meshed with their political education, helps people to resolve their problem, to take responsibility for their lives and taking it forward.
Sure. We've barely scraped the surface, and I'm told this is the time we have. But I know we'll have a whole lot more conversations, especially as the political temperature heats up in the country. But thanks for laying the foundation, and hopefully we'll be able to unpack a bit more of those modalities once you've gotten them right yourself. Joining us there is Jaki Seroke, who's the PAC's Finance Secretary. Also with us is Simphiwe Hashe, the chairperson of Azapo. Once again, to our guests, thanks for your time.